Well, hello everybody. I'm so glad to be here. This collaborative is phenomenal. I love what you're doing. So I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast, so you have to listen fast. All right. So I want to give you 3 reasons why it's important to remember the history in order to continue to build a prosperous future. I'm going to read for you a humorous story. It's called Life Without Black People. You may have heard of this. It's a story that's told about a group of white people who were fed up with African Americans. And so they got together and wished themselves away. They passed through a deep, dark tunnel and emerged in sort of a twilight zone where there was an America without black people. Now, at first, these white people breathed a sigh of relief. They said, at last, no more crime, drugs, violence, and welfare. All of the blacks have gone. And then suddenly, reality set in. The new America was not America at all. First, there were very few crops that had flourished because the nation was built on a slave-supported system. Second, there were no cities with tall skyscrapers because Alexander Miles, a black man, invented the elevator, and without it, one finds difficulty reaching the higher floors. Third, there were few, if any, cars because Richard Spikes, a black man, invented the automatic gear shift. Joseph Gamble, also black, invented the supercharged system for internal combustion engines. And Garrett A. Morgan, a black man, invented the traffic signals. Fourth, you couldn't use the rapid transit system because its predecessor was the electric trolley, which was invented by another black man, Albert R. Robinson. And even if there were streets on which cars on a rapid transit system could operate, they were cluttered with paper and trash because an African-American, Charles Brooks, invented the street sweeper. There were few, if any, newspapers, magazines, and books because John Love invented the pencil sharpener, William Purves invented the fountain pen, Lee Barrage invented the typewriting machine, and W.A. Love invented the advanced printing press. They were all, you guessed it, black. So even if Americans could write their letters, articles, and books, they would not have been transported by mail because William Barry invented the postmarking and canceling machine, William Purves again invented the hand stamp, and Philip Downing invented the letter drop. The lawns were brown and wilted because Joseph Smith invented the lawn sprinkler and John Burr the lawnmower. When they entered their homes, they found them to be poorly ventilated and poorly heated. You see, Frederick Jones invented the air conditioner and Alice Parker the heating furnace. Their homes were also dim, since Lewis later invented the electric lamp, Michael Harvey invented the lantern, and Granville T. Woods invented the automatic cutoff switch. Their homes were also filthy, because Thomas W. Stewart invented the mop, and Lloyd P. Ray the dustpan. Their children met them at the door, barefooted, shabby, and motley and unkempt. But what would you expect? Jan Matzelinger invented the shoe-lasting machine. Walter Salmons invented the comb. Sarah Boone invented the ironing board. And George T. Salmon, the clothes dryer. So finally, they were resigned to at least have dinner amidst all this turmoil. But here again, the food had spoiled because another black man, John Standard, invented the refrigerator. Now isn't that something? What would this country be like without the contributions of blacks, African Americans? Martin Luther King Jr. said, by the time we leave for work, Americans have depended on the inventions from the minds of blacks. So I share that story because until quite recently, I have never heard. Thank you. I had never heard of most of those inventions. I grew up in the Deep South in North Carolina in the 50s and 60s, and we had no black history in school. There was no black history. Almost no black history. You know the part that was included, but all the rest of it was left out. So, frankly, I grew up believing that I came from a race of largely worthless, mooching people, and it was up to us to be the opposite of that. So, 3 reasons that it's important to remember history. Now, there's a caveat. We need not only to remember history, but we need to remember it accurately. Because the truth is the ammunition we need to dispel those mischaracterizations and falsely negative stereotypes that those people had in the group earlier. Let me give you 3 scenarios. First, last weekend, Karen and Steve and several of us went to see Black Wall Street Burning. And that's a story by an Oklahoma producer of what many have called the 1921 Greenwood race riots, implying that black people were violently rioting in the streets. Well, the reality is there was a race riot, but it wasn't by black people. It was actually a massacre that was started by a few lawless white people who were full of hatred, who murdered hundreds of black citizens of Tulsa and burned their thriving community, homes, businesses, churches, personal property to the ground without legal penalty even today. And we're the violent criminals? So the first reason is an accurate account of black people in history might remove some of the fear and reticence that some people have to engage with us as partners for future success in spite of the atrocities of the past. Secondly, an accurate account of blacks in history would be very powerful because you don't have to look far to see some great examples. Right here in Oklahoma, you will see that accurate history, will show black people as courageous pioneers, ingenious entrepreneurs, and relentless pursuers of knowledge and opportunity. So, courageous pioneers like Clara Luper, who stepped up to lead history-changing civil rights activities. Now, if we had technology back then that we have today, she would have a much larger footprint in America's story. Ingenious entrepreneurs like W.J. Edwards, the millionaire junkman, and his wife Frances, who partnered to meet the needs of black people when they were denied elsewhere. So when no one would finance or sell homes to black people, they created the Edwards Edition. When white-only hospitals denied medical care to black people, they created a hospital right here in Northeast Oklahoma City. And when black children didn't have access to equal education, they created the Edwards School. And third, the relentless pursuers of knowledge and opportunity, like Ada Lois Scipio Fisher, who went all the way to the Supreme Court to break that racial barrier that kept black students out of the OU Law School. So that second reason then to remember our history accurately is that an accurate account of black people as courageous pioneers, ingenious entrepreneurs, and relentless pursuers of knowledge and opportunity would help us realize what invaluable assets black people can be to the success of this community. It should motivate leaders and decision makers to stop excluding us as participants in important visioning and strategy creation activities for our communities. You should capitalize on our courage, our brilliance, and our ingenuity. And finally, the third reason, an accurate account of black people in history could be the catalyst for some much needed healing. The atrocities of the past are now documented and exposed for everybody to see, and they're undeniable. The residual damage of those to black people and their families are clearly evident by any statistical measure you choose to examine, whether it's access to quality education, jobs, criminal justice, economic wealth, political engagement, or any other statistic. So, building a prosperous future, or continuing to do so, requires us to accurately remember black people in history, at least acknowledge the atrocities of the past, face the truth, and their continuing damaging results, and then engage black people in strategizing and planning the future. So remember history accurately, both the good and the bad, but don't get stuck there. Learn from it, make corrections, and let's move forward together. And I call your attention to the flyers that you have on each table highlighting some of the outstanding people of black people in history. We have an illustrious history to share with all of you today. And thank you for giving me those 10 minutes I just ran through.